Hello, my friends. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Christ and Coffee podcast, bringing the church together one coffee hour conversation at a time. Today, we're going to talk about online dating. Online dating is one of those things where there's stigmas to it. There's so many different options to pick from. So we're going to talk to the date doctor for her expertise on how to properly online date today. Christy, welcome back to the program. It was so good talking to you not so too long ago, and I want to continue the conversation. We kind of picked up during our last conversation about kind of the Christian culture being having a stigma to put themselves out there at the online dating scene, and I hope you could give some expertise on kind of how to do it properly, because it could be overwhelming, like which app to pick, and it's constantly changing. So what's the current scene like post-pandemic of the online dating world?
Yeah. So basically what we saw kind of come out of the pandemic is a huge increase in people using online dating apps. It was one of the top ways people met people, but then after 2021, the number one way people met someone that they were in a long-term relationship with. So we're really seeing kind of more of online dating, even though now we're kind of back in the real world. And when people ask me about it, I'm kind of like, if you're single, intentionally dating, looking for the right person, and you're not dating online, it's kind of like you don't have email in 2023. It's kind of, this is the way that we're dating now. And so specifically, if you're someone who, is a Christian or have more traditional values, sometimes there's a lot more resistance to using apps because there's a stigma, with Tinder and all of that kind of being like, oh, dating apps are for hookups or people that are just interested in casual dating, unless you're on one of the more paid sites or like the eHarmonies. But now I would say, like, if you are interested in the right person, it's really important to learn how to use the dating apps to basically be a tool to help you filter like who's single out there and who can I kind of start this conversation with.
So you started this whole date doctor situation. You worked for eHarmony, right? And before this was the main way. Before it was what, the people introducing friends, or what was the main way people met?
Yeah, friends through friends, and that's still the second way. So yeah.
Yeah, and then like I remember like just the old people who were before the internet. Yeah. The main way they met was like, oh, this person was in my apartment building. Right. We met that way, or I went to school with this person. But now this is a new norm. Pandemic accelerated it, and there seems to be a stigma for certain groups to not participate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think specifically, when online dating kind of came on the scene, like the 2000s is when eHarmony, who I worked with.
And that was cutting edge at the time.
Yeah. It was one of the first kind of ones. And then Match.com came on the scene, and now they own basically every dating app. But initially, Dr. Neil Clark Warren, who founded eHarmony, his mission was to reduce the divorce rate. Because obviously that was a big issue across the nation, but especially in Christian communities, he was seeing that a lot. So by developing like the science and the compatibility piece, that was really like the mission. And when I worked there, I know a big statistic that the company is really proud of is the divorce rate among eHarmony couples was 2%. So obviously it was working great.
That's a huge percentage.
I mean, amazing. And so basically the idea is like, okay, let's match people kind of on the back end by taking this personality test or whatever, and giving them people that we all already through our science have figured out like they could be a good fit with this person. And these traits are things that have more to do with like personality type, values, background, and the science really shows us like the more similar you are in important ways, the more compatible you are. And now
opposites don't attract.
Exactly. Like opposites attract, but similar people stay together is what I always say. So now with online dating apps, I mean, there's so many. There's a new app like every day. And so what they've kind of more niched down in different areas, but basically the idea is like you can control those filters a little bit more than someone doing that for you, which is what eHarmony did. So you can go on an app and download it, and then some apps require you to pay a little bit more, but you can decide, okay, even like a new feature on some of the apps is like you can decide what language you want them to speak. So a lot of my Armenian clients are like, okay, go on Bumble, put Armenian language, and you'll find people on that app that speak Armenian. So there's a lot of filters now that you can kind of go in there and use kind of strategize and see people that are single in your area or wherever that meet what you want.
So say I'm single, I don't like dating apps, but I desire to get married. Where do I start? Because it seems it's so overwhelming now.
Yeah.
Where what would you recommend for people to even jump on the online dating scene? What should they do?
Yeah, so you should take my quiz.
Okay.
But we have a way to kind of figure out like which dating app is right for you. But what I usually recommend if you don't take the quiz or just want to explore it is asking people in your area or your church or friends like, hey, what dating app are you on? And nowadays, like we go to weddings all the time from my clients, but other people that like, oh, we met on wherever. Yeah. So figure out like in your area, because I could say, oh, this app is the best, but it might not be what's used in your area.
Oh, interesting.
Your
so demographic matters.
Exactly.
What about the intimidation of the price points? Is that's also a factor?
Yeah, most are not so expensive. Like I'd say like the most you're paying is like $40 a month. And when you're thinking about
that's like a date
investment, yeah, it's really worthwhile.
It's actually a cheap date these days. It's like a McDonald's date. Yeah. Okay.
Some apps don't even require the payment piece, but you do get to use like more features to filter out. But yeah, so ask around like, okay, what apps are like people on and download maybe like one or two. And then if you're Christian dating, obviously go in and like put that filter. And what I always tell Christians who are dating, like make sure your profile really reflects your values.
So like I'm not just a Christian label, but like this is serious. I go to church every week. Put that somewhere in there.
Write it down explicitly on your profile.
So what are some advices to make a good profile? And then what are some advices to look for a good profile? So what start with the good profile? What makes a good profile?
So what I always say is like you want to, when you're creating your profile, you want to think like cover letter rather than resume. So a lot of people think like, okay, you're applying for a job, you just send your resume out, right? It's just, this is all the stuff I've ever done and this is where I've worked and where I went to school and here you go. Like you put it together if I'm a good fit. But when you write a cover letter, you're specifically writing to one company and you're like, okay, here, I'm connecting the dots for you. This is what you're looking for. This is how I meet all of those things, right? So you want to have the same approach when you're writing your profile. You don't want to just throw up some photos because, whatever, and just answer a few questions. You want to think, okay, my ideal person, like what are they looking for when they're swiping or on a dating app? And then I'm going to write that profile for that person. So if I want a Christian, then I'm specifically saying like X, Y, Z. If I want someone who likes, hiking in LA, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Everyone hikes here. Hikes here. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about like where I hike or I have a dog or whatever it is that you're looking for that you want that match. You want to just like explicitly have that on your profile. They say now it takes an average of 10 seconds for someone to decide if they're going to swipe left or right. So they're not really reading. And I hear from a lot of men that they don't read it at all. They're just like
swiping through the numbers game.
Until then afterwards they read. So I think like you do really want to be very effective. You don't want to be like, here's my profile and I'm not getting matches. Like, okay, what kind of thought are you putting into it?
So then what about looking for a good profile? How do you discern what's kind of like, am I dating a psychopath? Is the guy just wants to hook up with me? What are ways you could kind of filter the filters?
Yeah. So what I would say off the bat, if you're a Christian, obviously you want to look at like the photos. If like every single photo, they look like hammered or whatever, then likely not a fit. Right away, if you're using the filter, and a lot of times you have to pay to make sure that every match you see is a Christian. So for example, on Bumble, which I coach a lot of clients to use.
Bumble is where the girls get to pick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You put Christian, and then if you have the paid version, they're only going to show you Christians. But if you don't pay, they can show you some Christians, but some whatever. So this is one of the hacks that most people are like, oh, I hate dating apps. Well, you actually aren't using the filters the right way or paying. If you have something like that, that's a deal breaker. You have to make sure that you're seeing people that are only what you're looking for. So I would say really use like one or two main kind of anchor filters, like Christian and bachelor's degree, if you care about that, or mile radius or age or whatever. Just like
not height and income.
No. The three things I say if you're not getting matches that you want to be flexible about are age, distance, and height. So if you're like, oh, I'm not getting any matches, then you can play around with those things because those, from a research standpoint, have nothing to do with compatibility.
Right.
So those pieces are kind of like negotiable. And then the other thing I'll say is don't put too many filters. So you're like, okay, I want someone who's active and like you're pressing these filters. The algorithm's only giving you people that meet all of those things. So if they're not that important to you and you're putting them, then you really want to be a little bit more flexible. So when people are taking a more in-depth kind of like eHarmony or match, I always tell people don't answer the extremes every time. Only answer the extremes when it really matters to you or really exemplifies who you are. But if you're putting extreme on everybody, they're filtering out this whole other pool that could be compatible with you, but you're kind of self-opting out of it.
Got it. And what about the deception on these profiles? How many people, like I remember that being really high. Is it still high?
Yeah, I
People
mean,
lying on their profiles? Like
yeah. So men usually lie about their height, at least like 2 to 3 inches. And then women usually will kind of somehow alter like their
or
weight.
they
Yeah,
give like
like
a
how they
picture from
look.
10 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I always say is like you want to look for consistency. So if it's like you see someone's profile and they look like two different people, like on the profile, like they could be like the next Tinder swindler, or they could just like not have that like consistent photo. But I would say that's one red flag.
And
you should look
especially
for.
because you set yourself for failure, because if you do land a date, you show up, you're not that,
Yeah.
you're immediately turned off.
Well, I always say the good thing that came from the pandemic was like the introduction of the FaceTime date, which
Yes, I've seen a lot of people saying this now. I'm having a FaceTime date. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So what is a FaceTime date?
So what it was in the pandemic is not what I recommend now. What I recommend now is what I call like a vibe check. So it's just like a FaceTime
Vibe check. Okay.
like, hey, just saying hello on FaceTime. A lot of the apps now have this built-in feature. So just saying hello. I recommend this like all across the board. And if someone's like very resistant to it, I would be hesitant about that. But I recommend just kind of calling a little bit before the date, so you're not investing all the time and like you're not interested.
Okay. So this vibe check, what does that look like? How do you set that up? So so I just walk me through the steps of. Is it usually the guy who takes initiative, or it depends on the app?
Yeah, it depends on the app, but I would say if someone meets a lot of your criteria, I would just send the message. I don't see that as making the first move. It's just like, let's just get this started.
Okay.
And then what I recommend, we have a method called like the 5 messages to meet. So I don't think you should spend more than 5 messages back and forth, like talking to somebody on the app.
You don't want to get to the point where you're getting to know someone over text.
Yeah, definitely not.
I learned that lesson in middle school.
Yeah. So you just kind of want to make sure that they're answering the questions, asking you question, just like a few messages, kind of like an EQ check. Like, are they socially like aware? And then you want to transition. So if they ask you like a deeper question, hey, would love to chat about that. Like, are you up for like a FaceTime? Hello, I'm free this time or this time. Like you always want to transition. So if they're not having a conversation like that, then, you could say, hey, I'm really busy this weekend. I'm not going to check the app. Would you be up for just like saying hello over FaceTime or whatever? So you never want to get stuck in the pen pal stages.
Pen pal, okay.
A lot of people will be like, well, they didn't have anything, especially Christians, like nothing written on the profile that they're Christian, but their drop down filter says they're Christian. So what do I do? So what I recommend for Christians is to have a transition text that kind of has to do with like their weekend activities.
Hey, I'm going to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
What are you doing on Sunday morning at 11 a.m.?
Yeah. So like, hey, how was your weekend if you're coming off of a weekend, or if you're coming to a weekend? Oh, what are your weekend plans? So they say XYZ, I'm doing this. If they don't mention church, say, oh, that's cool. Like I'm doing this and this, and I'm going to church. I saw on your profile you have that you're a Christian. Like, do you go to church, or what does that mean for you? So that's like an automatic, easy.
Yeah, some of the best dating advice I got is just look for someone who's already serving the church.
Yeah, great. So that already
matches the checkbox.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Exactly. So they say, oh, I'm not really going to church now or whatever. Then like you have the ability to be like, okay, it's not really aligned right now.
Got it. And then this mood check with the face, how short should that be?
Pretty short. So you
don't want to like have a drink, and maybe during a pandemic you do that, but not anymore.
Not anymore. So I would say bookend it to be like, hey, I have like 10 minutes to chat. I have something at 20, but like, whatever. And then just saying hello, hey, okay, cool.
And that's a good rule of thumb too, right? To kind of have an endpoint for the date.
Yes, always. So you don't want to think the whole time, how am I going to get out of this date? Because it comes across in your energy a lot. So just be like, hey, first dates, I recommend being really short. So bookending it like no more than 90 minutes. So being like, hey, I have something at whatever, but I have this time before you go on the date.
Okay, so you do the filters, you do the messages, you do the mood check, and then you land the date.
Hmm.
What are good first dates?
Yeah. So I really recommend like something similar to coffee, but a little bit cooler. So,
Like a drink, if you drink.
yeah, I don't really like going drinks on first dates, but something like a coffee and walk around some cool place or something like that. And you really are more focusing on how you feel around the person. You don't want to come to a first date with like a checklist, like, okay, how am I going to find out like
Yeah.
if they want kids and like all that. Hopefully, if you did it right, the dating app kind of filtered most of that out for you, at least on like a baseline level. Then when you're on the date, you're just kind of noticing how you feel around the person. Because if you're in your head too much, then you're just going to come off as like not
Not
engaged.
present.
I can't tell you how many times in matchmaking we would get feedback like after the dates and be like, oh, I didn't think she was interested, but really she was just like thinking too much. So it's
Own
just
worst
like,
enemy. Yeah.
yeah, leave the investigator hat at home and just try to enjoy yourself. And then after that, you can reflect on, do I want to move forward?
Got it. And do you, okay, so let's go with, it's like a scavenger hunt. So the date doesn't go well.
Mhm.
What's proper etiquette?
Yeah. So I'd say if you just, first of all, what if it doesn't go well? It means so many different things for so many different people. But for me, if they meet your main criteria and it wasn't like a complete train wreck, like they weren't super offensive or whatever, you're just like, oh, don't really feel it, or
Yeah.
there was no chemistry, quote unquote. I always say go on a second date.
Go on a second date. Yeah.
Yeah. So the statistics is for men, it takes like around like 2, maybe 3 dates to know if there's that connection, and women it takes like 5 to 7 dates. So
Oh,
when
wow.
people
Much
are like,
longer. Okay.
not a good fit, first date, I'm like, you got to give it another shot, because who knows? Like they had a bad day, it was a
Yeah.
little bit awkward. Like you're potentially getting rid of someone who could be a good fit. So
Especially if they have all the criteria checked.
exactly. So if it went like catastrophically and like, whatever, then you can just say, hey, thanks for dinner, but it's not a good fit. Wish you the best. Like just kind of let it out that way. But like personally, I would say you do want to give yourself the option to go on another day. And usually I will push people to, I can't tell you how many clients I've matched that it was like,
The
first date was
wasn't the best.
average, and then
Because there's this
they're, like, married.
ridiculousness of love at first sight and all that
Exactly, yeah.
stuff. And
Usually I'll tell them if it feels like love at first sight, it's probably a disaster. So
Right,
just
right.
like run the opposite direction.
use reason first to get the foundation established. And then, okay, so definitely encourage people to at least try a second date,
Yeah.
unless there's a complete
Yeah,
red flag
exactly.
or flags.
Hmm.
So the date goes well. How do you encourage dating, or when should the point be like we gone on a few dates now, we're official? What is there is there some data to back up what's a good balance of that?
Yeah. So what we and kind of in like my methodology would teach is the 10 dates to soulmate roadmap. But in short, it's kind of like breaking down the process of really knowing someone's character. So a lot of people will come to me like, okay, I want someone who's loyal and generous and kind and whatever. I'm like, great. No one, you can't ask that question, right? You have to get to know somebody.
Like Blue's Clues it up
Exactly.
for the dates.
So what we recommend is by that like third date, you're going on what I call context dates. So it's not like you're just talking across the table. You're going somewhere.
We're gonna go serve at an
You're
orphanage.
doing
Let's see how he
something.
acts on the kids. Okay.
Not quite that, but yeah, exactly. That sort of vibe. Then you want to have some like deeper conversations. By the 7th date, what we say is like you want the top 3 answered. You want to know like are there any like mental health experiences, issues they're struggling with, have struggled with, family dynamics. You want to be aware of those, past relationships, and what's their values and vision for the
So
future.
this is being super intentional,
Yeah.
not waiting for the engagement to find these out.
Exactly.
And
It's
then,
like
and then
before
at least
you're
being
even
aware of what's happening.
Mhm.
And are they working on it? Are they honest about it?
Exactly. So it's more about like what they're sharing. It doesn't have to be, and it won't be perfect in any of those categories probably, but at least you know what you're getting yourself into before you're emotionally connected. And then you find out, 3 weeks down the road, oh, wow, they have like this whole thing. I had no idea.
Yeah.
You're being upfront about, hey, these things need to be answered before we have
So there's this
conversation.
intentionality throughout the process.
Yeah.
Not just okay, I we're in a relationship now, my job is complete. No, it's starting.
Yeah. And you really shouldn't be in a relationship, in my opinion, until that like 7th date. So around like the 2-month mark is probably a good time.
And then what do you think is a good timeline for a relationship? What's a good, I guess it matters how old you are too, but
Yeah. I think it really depends, but
I think like around 6 months you should kind of have a sense if this has a future.
Yeah, for sure. I think like you should, once you're in that, okay, I have these questions answered, then you want to know like someone's character is consistent over time.
Because
And in
people are on
different
their best
contexts.
behavior when they start
Exactly.
dating. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say like that's a good range. It definitely depends, but I think if you're going the marriage route and you're a little bit older, it could be around like 5, 6 months. And you're like, okay, this is like
Yeah,
serious.
because it's so off. It's so I get frustrated when people are just stuck in these relationships forever. One person knows it doesn't have a future, but they feel stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they've tangled too much, I guess, or
Yeah.
whatever. Because no one likes to. The problem is no one likes to be rejected or be the one who rejects.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there needs to be a healthy culture of that.
Mm.
Whether it's the first message that doesn't line up or the third date that doesn't line up. But it hurts. I mean, no, it hurts on both parties.
Yeah.
No one wants to be the like, and I don't like you. You're great, but no, or vice versa.
Yeah. And that's why getting all this information in the dating process is what's going to really help you make sure as much as you can that it's the right fit.
So how do you help people with the fear of rejection or the wounds of rejection? Just how do you overcome that? Because I feel like that's a huge part of this for people starting and then continuing. Because you're just like, oh no, I got to go through this again.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out.
Totally. Yeah. And I think if we just bake it into that's part of the process, that really helps people a lot. So as the cliche goes, rejection is God's redirection. Like, I think that's really true. Like, one thing my husband always says is like, oh, if I hadn't kind of gone through all those experiences, dated or whatever, I don't think like I would have been ready or we would have been together.
Right.
So I think like if you're seeing all those experiences, like, okay, this is just part of the journey to bring me to the right person. And so I can learn and adapt and work through whatever it is, then, you're going to come off with a lot less of what happens is the other option is like, you start getting insecure
Right.
and you start internalizing like, oh, it must be me. I'm not worthy of love or whatever all those messages are, rather than saying, oh, well, this just
work out.
happens. Yeah.
And I'm learning in the process and I'm maturing and
Exactly.
growing. And then, yeah, I mean, it's very cliche, but this whole process should be, if one done well, it should be a just journey of self-discovery
Exactly.
and understanding what really are my essentials and non-essentials.
Mm-hmm.
But this dating scene is, I guess my big fear with online dating would be kind of the stuff of you're looking for these red flags and you won't find them right away. Versus like the old school mentality of like arranged marriages where the families are involved. You kind of get a better sense if you kind of have that.
Yeah.
And then isn't there like a study where arranged marriages and romantic marriages, they kind of like after 3 years, they kind of level up in the level of happiness, something like along those
Is there?
lines.
Yeah. I don't know. That one.
But what? So it's not just this is the only way to do it. This is a good option.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the tool that I would encourage people to be open to. And then, you could still meet in so many different ways. Like we train on this in our program, and then we have people meet like randomly or through friends or whatever. But as long as you have that intentionality and you're actively like getting that, putting yourself out there in that way. And this is the easiest way to make sure you're filtering out some of those important things.
So it'd be like, all right, I've gone on 5 online dates. At least I learned what I'm looking for. And then, oh wait, now I'm in this social setting. I know what I'm looking for. It's not the person's on a profile, but they're here. Let me go talk to them. And then, again, not to be dogmatic or legalistic in any method, just kind of just create more options and more variables to pick from.
Totally.
Very cool. Any final thoughts or advice for people who may be single and are looking for love, or you have a sibling or know someone who's looking for love? Just what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say that like when you get really clear on what the most important things are for you, then it just opens you up a lot more to love, because you're not kind of creating all these conditions for it to come. Like, okay, it has to come in this way, or they have to be this, look like this, or whatever. And then really so many of the things that we think are going to make us happy are not the things, and they're other things. So try to hold everything with an open hand besides the things that really will make that relationship work or not.
Very cool. Thank you, Date Doctor. It's so good to have you back on this program. And hopefully, I know what you just said will help many people to at least go out there and just learn in this process.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you, everyone, for watching the Christ and Coffee podcast. Feel free to comment, like, and share this program. If this will help someone you love and learn, you could passively aggressively share this message, this episode to them. Thank you again for sticking to the end of this program. God bless you and much love.